Well, hello everyone. It's so great to be with you at our 11 a.m. message moments. Today I've brought along my friends and I'm just going to let them introduce themselves. So starting with you, Joe.
Hi, so I'm Joe. Some people might remember me from a couple of weeks ago. If you don't, I take care of the youth and the young adults at Yarra Valley Vineyard. And my favourite animal is a hippo. I'm not quite sure what you were hoping for. Sorry, Di.
We also have Trav Gray from Tacoma Treetops. Tell us, Trav, what you're about.
Hello, everybody. My name's Travis Gray, and I am the worship pastor at Yarra Valley Vineyard. I look after all of our worship direction and our musicians and our dancers and our painters and all that cool stuff.
Yeah, so great to have you here, Trav. And Robert Carter, you've got a very official name on your screen. Wow. Tell us about yourself.
Only my mother called me Robert. I'm Rob, and I've been around YVV for nearly as long as Di has, and I just won't go away. And I'm an elder here, and I love being a part of the family. That's enough.
It's so great to have you guys all here with us. So today we're going to be starting just digging into the Psalms, and we're going to be looking at a message today called Let the Psalms Speak. So each of these guys are going to just share some things that have been really relevant from the Psalms in this time of pandemic, that's been a personal aha moment for them, or even just something that's been really helpful for them. So we're going to throw over to Rob first. He's going to just open it up and dig in with, what are you finding the Psalms speaking? Let the Psalms speak, Rob.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Di. Look, one thing I do know about the Psalms is that they've always been important to God's people, way before Christianity. Back in Hebrew times, we understand that they were used all the time in the temple. We don't know exactly how, but in my growing up, I got introduced to the Psalms in the formality of being a young choir boy, and we used to sing the Psalms, wait for it, antiphonally. Yeah, that means you sing them across the church. You know, we would be in pews one side, the others would sit the other side, and so part of a verse would be sung and another part over there. But I have to say, it was all very formal, and it was probably kind of lost on me at that time. So some years later, in actually finding Jesus, coming to faith in him, now it's taken on a whole new meaning. And really, the Psalms have always been, they sit in the whole big book as a prayer book. They sit in the big book as a book of songs. And I think what we can sometimes lose is just how rich all of that is. And it's very easy to just drop onto the Psalms that, you know, make us feel good. But we got to know that there's other Psalms in there, and you say, can you really talk like that to God? And the wonder of it is you can. That's what it was all about. So I'd like to share a little bit of a Psalm with you that's speaking to me again. And it's Psalm 84. And Psalm 84 is, we understand, because all of these prayers were often being sung anyway, but it's thought that this psalm comes from a pilgrim who wasn't able to go up to the temple. It was one of those occasions where, you know, everybody else is making their way up to Jerusalem because it is the great Feast of Weeks or the great Feast of Pentecost, whatever. And for a reason, he wasn't able to go. That's the sense of this psalm. And so he begins to just long for the place of God. And he starts, how lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, it even faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. And then he's remembering, because, you know, up there in the temple, the times where the sparrows or the whatevers could be, wrens could be flitting around up there in the heights. And he says, even the sparrows found a home. The swallows have got a nest. They're in the place near your altar. And he is just longing to be there. So this psalm speaks to me as a song of, I want to be with the people of God. I want to hang out where the people hang out and where we come and worship you. So it resonates in me in that way. He says, Look, even those who get to dwell in the house, he's talking of the priests there, they're forever you. How I envy them. That's the complaint almost there. And then he says, blessed are those whose strength is in you, who have set their heart on pilgrimage. And then he goes on to say how they go from strength to strength until each appears before God in Zion. And so this psalm is saying that to me again. It's the prayer, the cry of my heart. I love talking to you guys virtually, but I want to go and give everyone a hug and say, hey, I want to be in your presence, in the presence of the Lord. We're doing it together full on. And I guess a time like COVID makes you appreciate that so much more. It's not just, oh, another Sunday, I guess I better go to church. It's actually, woohoo! We get together with the people of God. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere, it goes on to say. And O Lord Almighty, blessed is the one who trusts in you. So it's about a pilgrimage towards presence. And I hope that's the journey that we all want to be on. And I'm seeing that in the Psalms. So, Trav, on my screen, you're just below me. I'm going to pass to you and say, what's speaking to you from the Psalms, mate?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, no, I love that, Rob. But it just reminds me of that song. You know, the great song, "How Lovely Is Your Dwelling Place." Oh, such a that's I grew up on that. You know, in that song in the vineyard. It's so cool. But yeah, I really love what you said previously about the Psalms being. There's night and day in the Psalms, you know, like there's highs and lows, and you know, as a worship pastor, you know, you might expect me to talk about how the Psalms are, you know, the song, you know, the foundation for all of our worship songs, and you know, it's like those are the books that give us permission to worship. But for me, lately, it's more speaking to our human condition more than anything, you know, our humanity. And for me, the psalm that sort of stood out to me this week was probably the most famous Bible verse in all the world. It's Psalm 23. You know, the Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for you're with me. You know, like it's famous for a reason, because it speaks to a peace that we can't explain. You know, in Philippians 4:7, it says there's a peace that we can experience that we can't explain. And for me, that's the peace that God provides us. That's available to us, you know. And so, you know, especially in this time, you know, I haven't really been affected by the whole COVID thing. I feel like in my heart, I haven't really been affected by it. Obviously, I empathize with people that have experienced it firsthand, and you know, my heart goes out to all those families that have lost people with this silly virus, you know. But for me, the peace that God provides is it's just so practical, and it's just so relevant, and it's so available. And so yeah, that's what I've been really focusing on lately. You know, we get permission from the Psalms to be at our lowest and be at our highest, and to be a human is to be up and down. You know, I've noticed this. You know, I'm getting a little bit older now, and I'm not you know, I'm not there yet, but I'm
you're not, mate.
But I'm getting a little bit older, and I found that as I mature, I've realised that life is like a wave. Life is up and down, and our circumstances shouldn't dictate where we sit in our peace. Yeah, you know, yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what it's been saying to me. And you know, even looking at Psalm 22, the psalm just right before it, you know, David, he's like, why have you forsaken me? It's a crucifixion psalm. He's like, why have you forsaken me? And then all of a sudden we roll into this one, and he's like, nothing's going to affect me. I sit at a table with my enemies, you know, like it's really cool. So anyway, so that's what it's just freeing. it's just freeing for me. It's permission to experience lows, to experience highs, and it's just it's a freedom thing for me. So yeah, so that's what I've been experiencing. Joe,
Yeah.
let's kick it over to you, mate. What have you been looking at?
Well, it's super interesting that you would talk about that comparison and the peace that's available and the freedom that you have to experience lows, and at the same time the peace that God is offering. Because the psalm that I've been looking at for this whole year is Psalm 73, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one. The bit at the end is great. The bit at the end is like my verse for the year, and the last little bit is, "But as for me, it is good to be near God." You know, that peace that you're talking about. May Sovereign Lord my refuge. It's talking about the thing that you are really experiencing and finding in that psalm. But the rest of the psalm is not peaceful. So if you're not familiar with Psalm 73, it starts talking about how God's surely good to, his people. And then it talks about how the language he uses is, "I envied the arrogant," because everyone who's doing the wrong thing, they have no struggles, their bodies are well, they have money, they have beautiful things, they have no issue, there is no consequence for any of their actions. So why bother? Like, he's doing that low thing where he's like, everything out there is terrible, my life is no good, if I was just doing what everyone else was doing, I'd be right. What's with this God bizzo? Why isn't he looking after me? And I don't want to sound like a sad sack, but for me, perhaps this isolation stuff, I mean, I long to be around people. I long for routine. I'm realizing how much I miss just simple things. I think I've said to Di, like, for me, a highlight is to go out for coffee. I go to the shop and I buy a coffee because it's the closest thing to normality. And it's so easy, I think, to go, well, God, why aren't you in control? I mean, all this stuff is going on. If people were looked after, if you were looking after your people, no Christians would be sick. We wouldn't be experiencing this. We're a Christian nation, blah, blah, blah. Like, I can go there really quickly. And bigger than that, why are people who are doing the wrong thing in political circumstances, why are they prospering? Why are people supporting them? Why am I seeing all this injustice that's not being met? Why are all these things happening around the world right now? And it's so quick and easy to go, does God care? The beautiful thing with the Psalms is it talks us through the thought process, though. So it starts with that, I hate this, I can't stand the injustice, where's God? And then it talks through in this Psalm where he finds God. Interestingly, Rob, he says, well, what I did is I went to the temple. I went to church. I was around my people. He talks about seeing God in that place and going, well, how does God know? Where is God in this? And taking a moment to reposition himself to have a clearer vision. And that in the big picture of things, he's the one that's better off for having a relationship with God. The godly people are the ones that are, despite current circumstances, they're on top. They have access to the peace that you're talking about, Trav, which is so beautiful. And so to go through that process in the Psalm of this is circumstance, but now we're here. And despite that, I get to draw near to God. I still get to call him sovereign. I still get to make him my refuge and tell of his good deeds. It's hopeful for me. So in this minute, things don't feel great, but I have that hope. If I'm not experiencing that peace in the minute, I know that it's coming, and whether or not I feel near, he's right there for me to draw close to.
That's great.
Very cool.
So that's my takeaways from what I think can probably be read as a really heavy psalm. So that's what I've been sitting with. Are you bringing us a psalm today, or?
Well, I think we've been given so much from you guys, just your responses to 3 psalms, very different psalms, and we all will be reading through the psalms and discovering that all the Psalms have stuff to say, but for this moment, there'll be something really personal for each of us. So, Joe, I love that you had a fairly full-on Psalm, but there was a reversal that happens throughout that Psalm that keeps us looking towards God, and you just described that so well, so thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a few weeks, perhaps, of our Sunday message moments of just and getting some more responses about what is speaking to you through the Psalms. And so these guys have just kicked us off this week, and I might share some more next week, and we might get some other people speaking into this as well. So for today, I'm just going to ask each of my friends here just to do one final thing that you'd like to say about the Psalms, and then we're just going to tie it up for today, and next week we'll come back with some more digging into the treasures of letting the Psalms speak. How's that sound, guys?
Mhm.
And all right, so let's start with you. What's one thing you'd like to either practically throw out at people, or just a final conclusion for today?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, you know, how do we practice peace? How's it practicable? Like, you know, it's all good to talk about it, but like Joe's saying, there's low times, man. Like, it's tough times, and people are experiencing all sorts of stuff. You know, anxiety, depression, and all that stuff's oppressive. And so, how do we literally practice it in our day to day? And you know, I go back to that verse. You know, how to transform yourself by the renewing of your mind. You know, I've been impacted a lot by Putty Putman's book. You know, where he talks about it. Actually, starts here. Like a lot of people, like our church has overemphasized. I think that it's overemphasized the heart, and it's not taking anything away from the heart, but it starts here. Like you renew your mind. You do things that you can do practically, like exercise, like eating well, like all that sort of stuff. All that sort of stuff is a gateway to peace in my mind. And the other big thing is Thanksgiving. Like I said, I think I said a while ago, Thanksgiving is a gateway to peace. I believe so. You start with thanking God for everything that you've got. And then everything leads in from that. So I'd encourage everyone that's listening to this to go away and think practically about how you can attain that peace that God has for us through practical means, exercise, yoga. You know, a lot of people give yoga a bad rap. I love it. It's a time where you can sit, you can quiet your mind, you can stretch your body out, and you can really just concentrate on God. It's powerful. And so, so that's my takeaway.
Fantastic, Trev. Great practical suggestions. We're going to put these in our message momentum at the end as well. If you missed that, I'm taking notes. This is great. How about Rob? What's something practical or an action point you're seeing out of what you've shared? Oh, a question?
Yeah, well, look, it just occurs to me, of what Trav said, but I think if we can remember that the book of Psalms is fundamentally a prayer book. Now, that sounds like I'm going back to something old and antiquated. No, I don't mean that. But it's so permission-giving, because sometimes when all we can think of is help or thank you, you know, it's the innate thing that comes from the heart. But to go further and be able to say, and God is fine with me sitting in his presence and just laying it all out to him. And as Joe has so well said on Psalm 73, being able to grumble about the stuff that's not fair. I mean, it's conversing with God. So if we just can be ready to get aside and say, he's got big, big shoulders. He can take all that we want to say, and it frees us up to begin to, I think, really press in with God and find him in fresh ways.
Beautiful. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. Well said. And Joe, any last thoughts?
So it's not from the Bible, so don't be upset. But the saying, comparison is the thief of joy. I think it was Roosevelt said it first. And I think that's probably the thing that I'd love people to explore. So taking a moment to ask God to highlight, where am I comparing my current situation with something else, whether that's someone else's situation or your own expectation of what right now should have looked like. And then take it a step further and ask God, how can I take this comparison and turn it into joy? How can I take it, whether it's I'm looking at my neighbor and my neighbor's doing really well and I'm not. How can I be a blessing to my neighbor instead of envying what they have? My circumstance right now, I didn't get to celebrate a birthday the way I wanted. How can I celebrate and have joy now rather than comparing it to what I hoped it would look like? So that's probably my takeaway, is just where can we take that comparison and turn it into something godly and beautiful and joyful. That's all.
Good.
Great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. Really, really good. So, guys, online, this is the end of our little session today of just digging into the treasures of the Psalms and the practicalities of walking that out. So join us again next week and we'll let the Psalms speak for week 2. Thanks, everyone.